Go back to the ports and back to Washington, D.C. once again. Some new powers that the federal government has given shippers to dispute ocean carrier charges. John Gallagher, a Washington correspondent, is back with us once again. And John, let's talk about this a little bit, because coming out of the Ocean Shipping Reform Act, I think all of us were curious about what carriers can do to dispute these charges, or shippers can do to dispute these charges with carriers. And now the feds are saying you've got more power in your hands.
Yeah, yep, exactly. And so this came through, it's like a one-page advisory that came through yesterday afternoon. And, I gave it a quick read, and at first glance, it just looked like kind of boilerplate type thing where the FMC was just sort of putting into action what was already in the Ocean Shipping Reform Act. But after speaking with Peter Friedman, he heads up the Agriculture Transportation Coalition, which was one of the groups that was instrumental in informing the language that actually went into the Ocean Shipping Reform Act. It was more than that, because while the language was in the bill, the FMC sort of has leeway into how they kind of put that into action or enact the language that's in the Shipping Act. So there's a provision in the Ocean Shipping Reform Act that says the FMC is now authorized to self-initiate investigations into the ocean carriers' business practices, and also issue enforcement measures. So this advisory basically sort of outlines these 5 steps that a shipper can now go about actually filing these things, and it basically includes identifying the violation, coming up with the bills, submitting all the bill, like the bill of lading invoices and the overcharges that they received. Confirming that the dispute that they're talking about happened after June 16th, which was the date of enactment of the Ocean Shipping Reform Act itself, and then just submitting it into one email to the FMC. The advisory also then says when the agency receives the sufficient information, that they will promptly initiate an investigation, which could ultimately result in civil penalties, and they can order refunds. Now, and it also says if the filer chooses, now the shipper can still pursue their own legal case, including getting their own attorney and paying their own attorney's fees. But the point is they don't have to do that anymore. And then in the past they did have to do that. If a shipper had an overcharge dispute with a carrier, they would basically have to file a formal complaint with the FMC, and you hired a lawyer. The lawyers would sort of haggle over it, and then the FMC's administrative law judge would then render a decision. But the problem is this would take like a minimum of 3 years, and also like a minimum of $300,000 in lawyers' fees. So it had a real chilling effect on actually even shippers filing at all. I mean, exporters don't have to be these big companies. They can be these small, a citrus grower, that moves a certain small tonnage of freight, and these ocean carriers are huge with these deeper pockets. So the result was that there were no complaints charged. So what the ITC, what Peter Friedman was telling me is that this changes kind of the game, because now the FMC is now acting like what he called like a real enforcement commission, like the Federal Trade Commission or the Securities and Exchange Commission, where they self-initiate investigate. I mean, even if they just get like a tip from a consumer, they'll start initiating their own investigation. So this sort of changes the ball, and as Peter Friedman considers it, he thinks it's like a real game changer for shippers.
John, what is the advantage for a shipper pursuing their own action, if there is any? Just the speed of it?
Yeah. You mean, yeah, exactly. It's the speed of it, and also just getting reparations, because like I said before, there were probably countless shipper violations that shippers thought they were or were imposed upon them, but because it was so onerous, the time it took, the amount of money it took. Now in this case, I don't know if the time for the investigation will be shorter than 3 years, but presumably it would be. But that was the reason that they didn't do it before. So now they're the last 2 years with all the supply chain congestion and all these carriers that were, because of all the backups, they were putting late fees on the cargo, saying it wasn't their fault, it's the shipper's fault. The shippers are saying we have no control over it either. Now, and they're getting dinged by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now they have, so that would be the reason that they would want to file it on their. Now this gives them the opportunity now to file on their own instead of having to hire lawyers, which they a lot of times didn't have the money to do.
So, John, you mentioned that now the FMC has the power to behave a little bit more like a true regulatory agency, taking the initiative like the FTC would, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about, did they have this power beforehand and they just never chose to act on it? Or does the Ocean Shipping Reform Act now just beef up that backbone a little bit, so now they're more willing to go after these cases?
Yeah, exactly. No, they didn't. They weren't authorized to do that. Actually, they were more of actually one of the just recently one of the and it was on a panel discussion. One of the commissioners didn't even refer to themselves as a regulatory agency. This commissioner said that they're we see ourselves as an overseer of we're more like a merger overseer. I can't remember the exact word, but she actually said that we're not technically a regulatory agency, which was sort of odd, but no. So they weren't authorized to do it. So they didn't do it. And the other thing is the Ocean Shipping Reform Act also, while it gives them this power, it also gives money. It also increases the amount of money that they are authorized by Congress for funding in order to beef up the staff that can now do this. So whereas before, I mean, even if they wanted to, they might not have had the assets to do it. Now they actually have been given the funding to carry out these provisions that were included in the Ocean Shipping Reform Act.
John, that people problem and the funding problem, I think, was one of those things that was really hampering this from happening. And a lot of the push for that Ocean Shipping Reform Act, I feel like, came from just the public scrutiny of what was going on at the ports and how many issues that was causing. But now that some of that congestion, those issues are more spread out across the transportation system, do you see something like this coming to take over maybe the rail system too, and then eventually into over the road?
Maybe, and I know the dispute that's going on with the railroads right now is more over the labor dispute that's going on is over wages and benefits. But the shippers have a lot, as our colleague Joanna has been reporting on the shipper. There's been a lot of activity at the Surface Transportation Board from shippers, kind of paralleling what's been going on the ocean side about service issues and trackage rights and shared rights on the railroad. So I think with there seems to be this window of opportunity here for shippers like on the rails to get more power from the regulatory agencies. But we'll see if that happens.
It'll be interesting to watch for sure. Thank you for joining us this morning. What else are you working on going into the weekend?
I'm actually looking into. I was going to look into way stations. I know that sounds kind of dull, but I was sort of curious about are they still? They always seem to be closed, and I'm sort of wondering how much money is being put into these things if they're all closed. But I was going to kind of look into that a little bit. Also, as you mentioned, yesterday you had OIDA on or OOIDA on for talking about the speed limiter rule. Those comments are due next week, so I'll probably be looking into that issue as well.
All right, John, well, thank you for joining us. Have a good weekend. We will talk to you again soon. Right now, we're going to break down what's on our top stories today on freightwaves.com.